Hello, class of dark blue. I am sorry I could not be here today, but today I have to teach the 8th graders. Therefore, I have this video and a substitute to watch over you for the next 50 minutes. Now, there are 2 rules. Rule number 1. You must treat the substitute very nicely and pay close attention. This is very hard for you because you are the period right after lunch and you tend to be rowdy. Today, be good for the substitute or he or she will report to me. Rule number 2. You must take notes. Just remember, this is like any other day. I'm going to say a lot of stuff, some of which I will write on this video, but not all. Just remember, if you are overwhelmed by the number of notes, I will be posting this on the Moodle later, so you can always go back to this video. Very well, now I will get on the other side of the camera and tell you about the Persian Wars after 490 BC. Here we go. The Persian Wars, Phase 2. The attempted revenge of Xerxes. I'm calling it Phase 2 because this is not the beginning of the Persian Wars. Really, we already had Phase 1. Phase 1 was basically from 499 BC to 490 BC. And if you recall, that was basically the Ionian revolts and the Battle of Marathon. Then, as you know, Darius died, and now his son Xerxes has become king. And that's the second half of the Persian War. As you know, Xerxes became king in 486 BC, and right away he has one goal in his mind, to burn Athens. So he begins gathering a massive army from all the parts of the empire as they make their way to Susa. And the idea is to gather this army in secret. The reason he wants to do it in secret is so that the Greeks don't even know it's coming. How big is this army? Well, the low estimate is about 250,000 troops, but the high estimate, according to Herodotus, is 4 or 5 million troops. Now, even though he wants to do this to keep the Greeks from finding out, he's trying to keep it a secret, the secret does get out, and that's all because of a man named Demaratus. Demaratus was actually a former king of Sparta who was living in Susa because he was exiled, since he turned out not to be the rightful heir, and he was exiled, and he hates the Spartans. But when he sees this army gathering in Susa, he decides to send a message, but the question is, how? How does he send the message? So he decides to use a wax tablet. This is a wax tablet right here. Wax tablets are kind of the main way of communication in the ancient world. They were great because you could scratch a message into the wax, and then when you were done, you could just rub out the wax, and you would be able to erase it and use the message again. However, he can't just write, in the message, yo, Greeks, the Persians are coming. After all, the mail is controlled by the Persians. So he's going to have to find a way to get it down the royal road from Susa to Sardis and then from Sardis to Sparta without the Persians being able to read it. So he has to find a secret way to send the message. Demaratus decides to scrape off the wax in order to reveal the wood surface underneath. Then, he writes his urgent message on the wood underneath the wax. Once that's done, he then covers the message again with the wax, leaving only a blank wax tablet. The message is underneath the wax on the wood directly. With that finished, he sends it off to Sparta. It makes it down the royal road from Susa to Sardis, and then from Sardis to the Ionian city-states, and then off to Sparta without nary a suspicion. The problems only begin when it actually arrives in Sparta. King Leonidas, the current king of the Spartans, and the 5 Ephors can't figure out what the message is all about. It's just a blank tablet, what do we do? And nobody can figure it out. Finally, the answer is figured out by Leonidas' wife, Queen Gorgo. She comes to the 5 Ephors and to King Leonidas and says, scrape the wax, scrape the wax. So indeed they do. And sure enough, underneath, they find the cryptic message that tells them about the oncoming onslaught of Persians. Once that's figured out, the panic begins. Sparta knows that the Persians are coming, but none of the other Greeks do. So they do what's honorable, and they go and send a messenger to Athens to let them know. After all, they know that the Persians are coming for Sparta, and Sparta respects Athens because, after all, Athens won Marathon. So now, the preparations begin. It's time to prepare for another attack of the Persians. Preparations begin, especially at Athens and Sparta. We'll follow Sparta first and find out what they do. Of course, this is Greece, and so the first thing to do is to consult the oracle at Delphi. That's the first step when you have an uncertain future if you are one of the Greek city-states. First, we'll ask what the oracle had to say to Sparta. Now, it's a little bit hard to understand the oracle at Delphi because she speaks in cryptic language, but let's listen carefully and we'll write the main points down below.
Hail, O oracle of Apollo! Tell me, how shall Sparta fare in the coming Persian wars? Shall she be defeated? Shall we fight?
Hear your fate, O dwellers in Sparta of the wide spaces. Either your famed great town must be sacked by Perseus' sons, or if that be not, the whole land of Lacedaemon shall mourn the death of a king of the house of Heracles. For not strength of lions or of bulls shall hold him, strength against strength, for he has the power of Zeus, and will not be checked till one of these two he has consumed.
Oh, rats! So you see that the oracle basically said to Sparta that either Sparta itself would be destroyed, or one of its kings shall be destroyed by Perseus' sons, that is, the Persians. King Leonidas brings this news to the five ephors, and he informs them that they must fight against the Persians. Unfortunately, once again, the Spartans are in the middle of their feast of the Carneia, the feast where there are no military campaigns allowed, just like we saw with Marathon. However, Leonidas says the situation is indeed desperate, so basically he says, gee, I know that we're not allowed to send a military campaign like an army, but can't we bring the palace guard? And the five ephors, they think about it, and they decide, yeah, that seems reasonable. Why don't we just let him send the palace guard? So they allow Leonidas to bring a palace guard of only 300 soldiers with him. A palace guard of only 300 Spartans. And that way they get around the religious law that there was not supposed to be any military campaigns during the Carneia. So Leonidas makes sure to hand-pick men for his palace guard that already have sons. Leonidas only picks men who already have sons, so that they already have their name lasting through the Sparta, so that basically their wives already have sons. Leonidas picks men already with sons, because he knows that he believes the oracle. He knows they're all going to die. Now, that's not all the men that Leonidas is going to have to bring. He's also going to be allowed to bring whatever he can find on the way. He's allowed to gather other allies on the way to wherever the battle's going to take place. So that is another thing to be aware of. He will be gathering other allies as he proceeds north to face the Persians. We'll talk about that later. So that is, Sparta's all prepared now, but Leonidas with his 300 will be able to gather more troops as he moves north later. Now we need to look at Athens. Athens also is panicking about the coming Persian war, and they also send some delegates to the oracle at Delphi. Here's Delphi right here, and they send some delegates, and here's basically how that works out for them.
Hail, O oracle of Apollo! What say you concerning Athens and the coming Persian wars?
Why sit you doomed ones? Fly to the world's end, leaving home and heights your city circles like a wheel. The head shall not remain in its place, nor the body, nor the feet beneath, nor the hands, nor the parts between. But all is ruined, for fire and the headlong god of war, speeding in a Syrian chariot, will bring you low. Many a tower shall he destroy, not yours alone, and give to pitiless fire many shrines of gods, which even now stand sweating, with fear quivering, while over the rooftops black blood runs streaming, in prophecy of woe that needs must come. But rise, haste from the sanctuary, and bow your hearts to grief.
Oh, rats. But then, the Athenians didn't like that message, so they decided to try again, sending the same delegates but in a disguise.
The oracle at Delphi, please tell us what we should know concerning Athens and the coming Persian wars.
Not wholly can Pallas win the heart of Olympian Zeus, though she praise him with many prayers and all her subtlety. Yet will I speak to you this other word, as firm as adamant. Though all else shall be taken within the bound of sea crops, and the fastness of the holy mountain of Kithaeron, yet Zeus the all-seeing grants to Athena's prayer that the wooden wall only shall not fall, but help you and your children. But await not the host of horse and foot coming from Asia, nor be still, but turn your back and withdraw from the foe. Truly a day will come when you will meet him face to face. Divine Salamis, you will bring death to women's sons when the corn is scattered or the harvest gathered in.
Oh, rats.
So you see here also, basically, the gist of the oracle was, Athens is doomed, but the Athenians will be saved only by the wooden wall, and somehow the island of Salamis shall be involved in the future of Athens. So much for Athens and the oracle at Delphi. As you can probably see, Athens is a little bit more irreligious than Sparta. Sparta completely believed the oracle right away, and Leonidas took it very seriously, a king's going to die. But Athens tries to trick the oracle, and sure enough, it continues. Even though the oracle clearly said that a fight must be made, even though it clearly said that Athens better worry, the Athenians pretty much forget about it. However, things take another turn in 483 BC. In 483 BC, Athens strikes it lucky because in that very same year, 483 BC, they suddenly discovered silver in the mines at Laurium. That is, they suddenly had this new source of wealth. And the big question now before the Athenians, completely separate from the Persian War question, was what to do with the silver that was discovered at Mount Laurium. It belongs to Athens because it's within the Attic Peninsula, and the Greek city-state of Athens basically covers the entire Attic Peninsula. So the big question is what to do with it. And of course, this is Athens, so it has to go before the Ecclesia. There we are right there. Here they are at the Ecclesia, about to ask themselves what to do with all of this, what to do with all this newfound wealth. Let's listen in and see what they're saying.
Men of Athens, we must use the new silver from the mines at Laurium to build a navy, for the Persians shall be back, and we must dominate on the sea to prepare for their return. We must build a navy of triremes. It is expensive, but the new silver is a gift from the gods to build it. But of course, that was not the only opinion. This is Athenian Democracy. Also, Aristides the Just had a different idea. No, men of Athens, we are, after all, warriors of the land. We won Marathon without the help of Sparta. We are warriors of the land. I say we divide the new silver equally among all the citizens of Athens, for it is we who buy our own armor, and it is we who defend our own city-state in time of need. It is we who defended them against the Persians. Of course, this made the crowds happy with Aristides. Yeah, Aristides, yeah, silver. Yes, silver for all. Seeing that he was losing, Themistocles resorted to deceit in order to sway the masses towards his side. Wait, men of Athens! I have just received word. Oh, Persia, we don't even know if they're coming, but I just heard that the island of Aegina, our close neighbors and supposed to be subject to us, are deciding to revolt and they'll soon be attacking us. We need to build a navy to attack them. Gasp! He's right! Yeah, we hate Aegina! He's right! Aristides does not know what's best for our democracy. It's high time we ostracized him. Yeah, ostracism, yeah! Oh, bummer. Indeed, Aristides was ostracized, and Themistocles got his way. The new silver laurium would be used to build an Athenian navy. And not just any old navy, this would be a navy Greek style. That is, they would develop state-of-the-art triremes. This is a trireme right here. It's called a trireme because there are 3 rows of oars involved. I honestly can't see the third one. Here's 1, here's 2, here's 3. 3 rows of oars. And the reason I say that's typically Greek style is because just like Greek hoplites have to be completely disciplined in order to keep the phalanx, so in this case, Greek naval personnel had to be extremely disciplined in order to row these triremes. You have to go in order. As you can see here, this picture gives an idea of how difficult it was. These guys don't want to cross their various oars with one another, and so they have to go completely in sync. This is not just something you get slaves to do. This is not just something that you get prisoners to do. This is something that took a lot of training, a lot of difficulty. But it was an investment that Athens was willing to make. With the new silver laurium, they finally became a sea power. Athens immediately built 200 triremes, which is far more than what it had before. Before this event, they probably had about, a total of 50 ships. But after this event, they built a navy of 200 triremes, in addition to the other 100 that they were able to get from various allies. So it became clear Athens would be the sea power in this war, whereas, of course, Sparta would be the land power. Meanwhile, while Leonidas was getting his 300 and Themistocles was building the Athenian navy, of course, King Xerxes was not idle. His army was basically prepared, and they began the large journey down the royal road from Susa to Sardis, and from there they went to the Ionian city-states. In the meantime, he also had a navy coming up from Phoenicia. There would be a navy going along this journey as well. The basic idea now was as the army went on land, the navy would go by sea, supplying the army as they went. They had to work together. And so this time the navy was hugging the coast specifically to supply the army. Now this, of course, went well until, of course, they arrived at the Hellespont. For there, the army could go no further, and Xerxes had to figure out a way to cross the Hellespont. Of course, the easiest way to do so would be to have his army come to the narrowest point of the Hellespont, right about here. And then his plan was basically, just give me 1 second here, to build a pontoon bridge across that Hellespont. So a pontoon bridge, of course, is what we saw this already. We saw it with his father Darius crossing the Bosporus. Basically, it was a matter of lining up boats and trying to build a bridge across the Hellespont itself. However, on his first attempt, met with disaster because on the night when they were building the bridge, a huge storm came and sunk all of his ships. This made Xerxes furious. Rah, 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 rah. He decided to punish the water. Yes, you heard me right. He literally decided to punish the Hellespont, and also, of course, to execute the engineers whom he blamed for the terrible fiasco.
You salt and bitter stream, your master lays this punishment upon you for injuring him who never injured you. But Xerxes the king will cross you with or without your permission. No man sacrifices to you, and you deserve the neglect by your acid and muddy waters. Kill the engineers and throw their heads into the water.
After duly punishing the waters, Xerxes, of course, tried again, and this time it worked. They lined up the ships and built a roadway over it, perhaps thatched with straw. No one quite knows exactly how this was done, but most people believe that at least it was done. They just take Herodotus' word for it. You can see the idea here. Well, how many ships total? It was massive, 360 ships across, and then they got this entire huge army to cross the Hellespont.
According to Herodotus, it took 7 days and 7 nights for the entire army to cross. It was so massive. Now, of course, this was, of course, noticed. A poor Greek farmer noticed this coming, and he ran back to Athens and Sparta to tell them that this army was far bigger than anyone expected. Oh gosh! Oh. Once Athens and Sparta got the word that the Persian navy was indeed coming by the sea, and that their army had come by land and was now crossing the Hellespont, and that the two were coming together, it was time for Athens and Sparta to talk. Now you got to remember, it was hard enough for Leonidas to convince the Spartans, and it was hard enough for Themistocles to convince the Athenians. Now the two of them have to work together. And of course, there was a lot of disagreement about what to do. These are Greeks, and they like to discuss. So Sparta at first proposed that they make a stand at the at the Isthmus of Corinth, right about here. Their idea was make the Persians travel as far as possible to get exhausted and at least save the Peloponnesus. But of course, that meant just giving up anything north of the Peloponnesus. So of course, Athens, led by Themistocles, was not happy with that plan. Athens had a different plan. Their idea was, well, why don't we attack in Thessaly? Thessaly is wide open plains, so that would be an easy place to fight for our phalanxes. After all, a phalanx doesn't do well on rocky ground. And it would save all of Greece. It would save everybody. But Sparta pointed out, no, that's just stupid. First of all, it doesn't let the Persians march far enough. We want them to keep marching and tire themselves out as much as possible. Secondly, wide open plains are a bad idea. They're to the advantage of the Persians. So eventually, a compromise was reached. That is, neither Thessaly too far north, nor the Isthmus of Corinth too far south. They decided to settle halfway in between, right about here at Thermopylae Pass, right here at the corner of this little inlet here, Thermopylae Pass. The Persians, in the meantime, ever advanced forward, and it's pretty amazing what Xerxes did next. Of course, his army's doing just fine on the land, but he recalled that his father Darius had that terrible trouble with the storm at the south of Mount Athos before, so he had his army dig a huge canal across the entirety of Mount Athos just to prevent his navy from going to that stormy area at the south of Mount Athos. And so you can see how busy this guy is. He's both building a pontoon bridge way over here, and he's building a canal way over here. He is really serious about coming to get these Greeks, and he keeps advancing forward. Here's our navy coming forward now on their way to Thermopylae, and here's the army coming now, and they're about to meet at Thermopylae. Now, even though the Greeks decided to meet the Persians at Thermopylae as a kind of compromise between Athens and Sparta, nevertheless, it turned out to be a perfect spot because, well, Thermopylae was a narrow pass, and that was the only way to neutralize this huge Persian army. Remember, the Greeks are very much smaller. Leonidas is going to be coming with 300 men, and who knows how many other men that he can get. But the Persian army is huge. But a narrow pass neutralizes that because it prevents flanking. This is Thermopylae today, and it doesn't look like much, but one thing you'll notice is on one side there's a mountain, on the other side there's this, but back then, this is all reclaimed land over here. Back then on the other side was a sheer drop to water. So this would be more like it looked like in the Greek times. Let me just color this in here. If you just imagine this whole thing, this is all water over here. And this mountainside is over here. So here's the thing, it leaves only a small narrow pass that the entire width of it is basically able to be guarded. And that neutralizes the Persian numbers. So really it was a genius idea. Now, there is one problem though. This is not going to be something that can be done by land alone. Let me explain. Here once again is the Thermopylae Pass. The Spartans have arrived. They came up from Sparta, led by Leonidas, who on the way managed to gather another 8,000 warriors to make their stand at Thermopylae. So that's one thing to be aware of. Leonidas now has 8,000 warriors. King Leonidas of Sparta has 8,000. That's something a lot of people forget. They just hear about the 300. But he has about 8,300 warriors total. But only 300 of those guys are Spartan. But here's the thing. The Persian army may be coming down by land. And they may be the Spartans may be able to stop them because they've neutralized the outflanking maneuver. However, here's the problem: the navy's also coming down by sea, and theoretically, I'm going to draw this part separately, if the Navy were to come behind and disembark soldiers on the land, and a bunch of soldiers came on the land and came up and sandwiched the Spartans, that would completely neutralize the flank advantage, that would completely neutralize the narrow pass advantage, and the Spartans would be utterly crushed. And so, basically, Athens knows its job. Athens is going to take care of the sea here, and they know that their job is going to have to be to prevent the Persians from getting that far, to prevent the Persians from disembarking on the land behind the Spartans. So Athens sends its navy. Let's do their navy now over here. And their navy has one job: prevent that Persian navy from coming up and flanking the Spartans. So that's basically, you see the teamwork that Sparta and Athens has to have. Sparta has to prevent the Persian army from advancing on land. Athens has to prevent the Persian navy from disembarking and sandwiching behind Sparta, so they have to block them by sea. This right here is called Artemisium Straits, the Straits of Artemisium, and this is Thermopylae Pass. Thus, the following battle would technically be known as the Battle of Thermopylae Artemisium. The Battle of Thermopylae Artemisium is one of the defining battles of Western civilization. Even though it was complicated and long and ultimately a loss for the Greeks, it definitely changed history. I'll explain why a loss changed history in a second, but first of all, it is a complicated battle because you're watching two battles at once, really. You're watching the land battle, as you can see right here, and you're watching the Battle of Artemisium right here, and it takes about 3 days. So let's talk about day one. Battle of Thermopylae Artemisium, 480 BC. Know that date. Let's talk about day one. And day one on land, the basic event that happens is Xerxes sent the Medes. He sent the Medes. That's one problem with Xerxes here. Already, he's lost his outflanking advantage. As you can see here, the army is huge, but in the end, they can only basically hold the same width as the Spartan phalanxes, or actually the Spartan/allies phalanxes. And so that threat is gone. But Xerxes seems to make the mistake of sending his contingents one by one. Remember, this Persian army isn't united, so they send one army at a time, and he sends his Medes on the first day. And as you're about to see, here's what happens. Plummet, pummel, blood into the water, blood. Basically, the Medes completely died. They were no match for the Spartan phalanxes, and it was a complete crushing victory of the Spartans and company on the first day. So let's write that here. Basically, let's see, Medes crushed. It's basically the triumph of Greek discipline over Persian numbers. Now, on the same day, the same thing basically happens. The same kind of triumph happens on the sea. So over here you have basically the same story on the sea. First of all, let's talk about numbers. Basically, according to Herodotus, this is about 1,200 Persian ships. And the Greeks, led by the Athenians, have about 300 ships, including 200 brand new triremes. The ones that Themistocles built. So, what basically goes down over here? Well, the Persians trust in their numbers. They think we can beat these Greek ships, and they come down, and basically they are crushed. The Greeks maneuvering, the Greek triremes, the Greek discipline is basically no match for the Persians, and the Persians lose about 50 ships that day. Let me write that down right here. The Persians end up losing about 50 ships. And so, even though the numbers are vast and there doesn't seem to be any way for this to work out, the first day is basically a Greek victory on both sides. It's pretty amazing, but we have Greek victory on day one of Thermopylae Artemisium. So much for day one. Of course, by this point, Xerxes is furious. This should not be happening. So he decides the next day, on day two, to send in the big guns. On day two, Xerxes sends the 10,000 immortals, the elite corps of Persian troops that basically are always replaced, and so they're called immortal. He sends the 10,000 immortals. Everybody's filled with apprehension at this point, Greeks and Persians, because these are the elite. These are the ones that have always been the scary Persian soldiers, and they come on to the Spartan warriors with their other allies. And here's the result. And once again, we basically have, here, just give me 1 second. We basically have the blood flowing into the water. And the immortals are dead, basically. That was it. It's a complete crush of the immortals. Basically, as Herodotus says, the immortals did no better than the Medes. It really does seem that as long as the Spartan contingent is not flanked, is not outflanked, that they really do have a victory. They've been able to pin this huge, massive army down for 2 days. For 2 days now, the Spartans have them pinned on land. Meanwhile, what's happening on sea? Well, likewise, Xerxes realizes the Athenians have the upper hand when it comes to naval discipline. So he decides, you know what, forget this. He decides to send his navy around Euboea. He decides, basically his plan is this. Instead of having the Persian navy come through the Athenians, go around this island of Euboea, take the long way, and come around, and then disembark right here, and then sandwich the Spartans in. So they send off their navy going in that direction. That's basically part of their main plan the second day. Now, unfortunately, all goes well until the evening when they land right about here, and suddenly a massive storm comes. And basically completely destroys 200 of their ships. So let's put the summary over here. On the day 2, the Persian Navy tries to go around Euboea. But a storm destroys 200 of their ships. Bad luck. So, basically day 2 is once again a Greek victory. This is really quite amazing if you think about it. This massive Persian army and navy is being stopped by a small 300-ship navy and 8,300 soldiers on a narrow pass. Of course, as you can imagine, by this point, Xerxes is hopping mad. This isn't supposed to be happening! So he really doesn't know what to do. This wasn't the plan. This massive army should have been able to crush these Greeks like flies. But then, on the night between day 2 and day 3, luck goes his way because of a Greek traitor. A farmer named Ephialtes comes to Xerxes in the middle of the night and says, "Bow!" Oh, yes. "O King of Kings, I know of a secret pass in the mountains that will lead you to the area behind the Spartans. That way you can outflank them and sandwich them and crush them together. And I'd be willing to show you this pass for a small price." Of course, Xerxes doesn't have much to think about. "Give him money." "Okay, great. I'll show you the pass." And he does. This traitor Ephialtes goes to show the Persians the pass in the mountains. Ephialtes led Xerxes' army. Xerxes sent a contingent to go down the path and see what they could do. They followed the route, and as Ephialtes promised, it led to a spot behind the Spartan lines. However, Leonidas was aware of this path, and he had set a guard of Phocians to guard the path. Here's the Spartans right here. Here's the main Persian army, and here's the troop that Xerxes sent. And there were some Phocians guarding the path. However, as soon as they heard the Persians coming, the Phocians just got up and fled, and the Persians were able to advance without any problem. Now, as it turned out, a farmer was present in the mountains when the Persians passed by, and he ran up to tell Leonidas, "Leonidas, Leonidas, the Persians are coming from behind, the Persians are coming from behind. There are so many of them that their arrows would blot out the sun." And then one of Leonidas' men, Dionychus, said, "Well, good, then we'll fight in the shade." That famous line from the Battle of Thermopylae. Leonidas knew that they were in trouble, and he took a very strange decision. He told all the men besides the 300 Spartans, "Go home. We don't need you anymore. Me and my 300 will stay. The rest of you go home. His reasoning was pretty simple. If you take a look at the map here, Leonidas knows they're doomed here, and he knows that the Persians are coming for Athens. By sending most of his men away, they can go down and prepare whatever needs to be prepared for Athens. He and his men would pin them for as long as they could and buy time, while the other 8,000 men would go and warn Athens and prepare. It basically was an attempt to buy time, but he also knows they're going to die. So he decided not to waste men. Now, most of the soldiers listened. A lot of them decided to go home, and they went to Athens. However, there were about 1,000 soldiers who were adamant about staying. Leonidas was accompanied by 1,000 soldiers total of Thespians and Thebans. So basically now, we can start to summarize, on this third day, Leonidas sends everybody but the Spartans home. But 1,000 Thebans and Thespians stay. That's something a lot of people also forget. 1,000 inhabitants of the city-states of Thebes and of Thespiae decide to stay behind with Leonidas. Sure enough, the battle begins, and at first the Spartans hold well against the oncoming Persian onslaught, but they're no match for when the other enemy comes from behind, and basically all sides crush, and all the Spartans die down to the very last man. And again, the blood flows into the water. All the Spartans die. Let me write that down. Just give me 1 second. Let's see. So, all of the 300 plus the 1,000 are killed due to the ambush from behind. Xerxes, of course, is happy now, and as he crosses the land with his men, he looks at the Spartan bodies, and he tells the men up front to make sure to destroy the Spartan bodies, and also the Persian bodies, so that the men in the back won't be demoralized when they pass by and see how many Persians died because of just so few Spartans and Greeks. Meanwhile, in Artemisium, the navy of the Persians returns back to the Strait of Artemisium from Euboea, as you can see right here, and they also engage with the Greeks during the first part of the day. They engage, and actually both sides lose about 80 ships. Basically, it's about evenly matched on the sea. At Artemisium, both sides lose about 80 ships. Now, that sounds like a kind of victory. However, you got to remember, the Greeks only have 300 ships, and the Persians still have a good, who knows, 1,600 or so. I can't do math very well. And so the point is, this is actually a Greek defeat. However, pretty soon, they get the news that that Thermopylae is lost anyway. And once they get the news that Thermopylae is lost, basically the Navy hears that the land battle is lost. And once they hear that, they've lost their purpose. Their only purpose was to prevent the land battle from being lost. And once they hear the land battle is lost, they basically return to Athens at Themistocles' command. So we can draw their route now. They also return. Let me get the blue here. Just give me a second here. They return now, having lost or about to lose as well. So ultimately, this battle was a loss, but in a certain sense, it was a victory because Leonidas and his 300 Spartans and company were able to allow the Greeks to buy time. From there, the Persians advance. Both the army and the navy. Leonidas' strategy of buying time did indeed work, for since they were able to pin back the Persians, those soldiers who he released went back to Athens, and the navy, led by Themistocles, also came back to Athens. And Themistocles took charge, and he basically had one plan: evacuate, evacuate. All the Athenians left the city. The oracle, after all, said the city was doomed, and all Athenians evacuated to the island of Salamis. That's worth writing down. So let me write that down here. Just give me a second. All the Athenians evacuated. I'll actually use white here so we can actually see it. All Athenians evacuated to the island of Salamis. And it was a good thing, because indeed it was true. Once the Persians got past those Spartans, they came down to the Attic Peninsula, and Xerxes achieved his goal. His navy's also coming. Xerxes achieved his goal. He burned the city of Athens. Let's get some fire here. Burn, 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 burn. He burnt the Acropolis. He burnt the old Parthenon. He built much of the structures of Pisistratus. Athens was burned. But most of its citizens were safe on the island of Salamis. Now it was time to decide what to do next. There was a huge mess on the hands. Where to stop the Persians now? And once again, the Greeks fell into fighting. The remaining land soldiers, led mostly by the Spartans, let's draw them here, just give me a second. They decided to fall back and make a stand at the Isthmus of Corinth. And they even started building a wooden wall across the isthmus. A wooden wall. Of course, that was what the oracle said. A lot of people thought that's what we need to do. We need to make a stand at the Isthmus of Corinth and try to defeat the Persians on land at the Isthmus at Corinth. So basically, some Greeks are for making a stand on land. On the Isthmus of Corinth. This is especially the Spartan idea. However, as you can probably imagine, Themistocles has a different idea. Themistocles says, just give me one second, I need to make some space here, so let me take out some of this writing up here. Themistocles has a completely different idea. His idea is, he says no, a stand on the sea. Themistocles basically says that on land the Persians will eventually win, because their army is so vast. On land, the Persians will win. If we wait for a land battle, we will lose. So he has a completely different idea. His idea is to make a stand at the island of Salamis. His idea is a naval battle before the Isthmus of Corinth. This naval battle at Salamis. Because after all, the Persian Navy has to supply the Persian army. The army's not going to leave the Attic Peninsula until the Navy is also ready to catch up with it. So Themistocles' idea is get rid of the entire Navy. One fell swoop. Here's the Navy right here. The Navy is on its way up here. The Army's right here. And here's the thing. If you look right here, theoretically it would have to go this way. If the Greeks can stop them right here, before they can go that way, right here, then the army can't progress, because it's the Navy that supplies the army. Since it's so vast, this army cannot proceed down the isthmus if the Navy isn't going to make it. So basically, Themistocles says, make the stand here. All or nothing. Destroy the Persian Navy in one fell battle. The risk is high, that's for sure. No one denies that. But it's better to. The risk is better for the Navy. The risk is high, but better. Now, of course, a lot of Athenians disagree with Themistocles, and a lot of Spartans disagree. After all, Athenians are thinking the wooden wall. Sparta's building a wooden wall. Let's go to the wooden wall. And even there were actual fights. Like in this picture right here, you see Eurybiades, the Spartan, preparing to strike Themistocles in the conferences that ensued. And Themistocles famously said, sure, go ahead and hit me, but at least hear me out. So he gave him permission to hit him, but he said, strike, but listen. It was a famous thing. In the end, Themistocles decided to resort once again to deceit, to force the decision. And here's how he did it. To understand how his trick worked, first we got to remember the situation. Basically, the Persian army has come down here and burned Athens, but they're just hanging out now because they're waiting on the Persian Navy. The Persian Navy is meanwhile coming around the Attic Peninsula, and the two of them are supposed to meet at the Isthmus of Corinth up here. But in the meantime, they got to figure out what to do about the Greek Navy, which is here at Salamis. Now, this Greek navy is Athenians, but it's also other ships. For instance, all these conferences they've been having have been on the ships behind the island of Salamis here. This is the island of Salamis. Know that because, of course, this is the Battle of Salamis, 480 BC, the greatest Greek victory in the Persian War. Now, here's the problem. Most of these allied ships want to leave. They want to leave to go help the wooden wall project at the isthmus way over here. And Themistocles doesn't want them to go. He's convinced that plan is doomed because Persian land forces are superior. So he needs to convince all these ships to stay, not to go way over here, to stay here at Salamis. So he does a trick. First of all, he sends a messenger to Xerxes. Xerxes, in the meantime, has set up a throne to actually watch whatever battle ensues up on the land over here to watch the battle. And Themistocles sends a messenger who's a fake Greek defector, basically. This messenger is pretending to be a defector. So that's one thing to notice. He uses deceit again. You know, Themistocles is pretty good at the deceit thing. Themistocles sends a Greek defector. Just give me 1 second. He sends a fake Greek defector. And the Greek defector says, the Greeks are going to try to escape. The Greek ships are going to try to escape on the backside, on the west side of Salamis. The Greek ships are going to run for it. Now, of course, when Xerxes hears this, he thinks, I got to stop them. So, which is basically exactly the plan that Themistocles wanted. Basically, Xerxes splits up his Persian forces and sends part of his navy to the other side. Now, this achieved two goals for Themistocles. One, this trapped the other Greeks behind Salamis. Now they can't escape. This trapped the Greeks, which is what Themistocles wanted. He wanted to trap all the Greeks. It trapped all the Greek ships. But then it also split the Persian forces. And not only that, it drew them into battle. And guess what? Into battle in, once again, a narrow pass. It drew them into battle in a narrow pass. Narrow pass works for their land army. Of course, now it'll work for their sea army. Because they take the bait, they decide to pursue down this small strait of Salamis right here, and all of a sudden, boom, the Greek ships are there, the Greeks attack, and they overwhelmingly, they're just better at maneuvering. They overwhelm the Persian navy, so much so, here's an example right here. Here's Greek ships smashing into Persian ships. Here's another one right here. So much that even when the Persian ships tried to retreat, as they tried to retreat, they ran back into their own ships and just caused destruction. Herodotus describes it as bodies and broken ships everywhere. It just was a huge slaughter for the Greeks. They lost 300 ships in this battle. The Persians lost 300 ships. And it was a complete victory for the Greeks. It was so much of a victory that, let me just make some room here, that finally Xerxes gave up. He realized that that he just can't beat these Greeks. Their discipline or whatever they have, Xerxes gives up and goes home. So, super important battle, the Battle of Salamis, cooperative battle between the Spartan and the Persian navy, what little there is of the Spartan navy, and a complete victory for the Greeks. Of course, know that date and that battle. The Battle of Salamis, 480 BC, as well as the Battle of Thermopylae, 480 BC. They're both in the same year. One last thing, by the way, if that's true, then what about the wooden wall? Didn't the oracle say the wooden wall will save them? Well, to some of you it's probably obvious by now, but the wooden wall was the navy of Themistocles. Unwittingly, Themistocles fulfilled the oracle at Delphi because the wooden wall was the Athenian navy itself, which not only saved Athens, but saved all the Greeks from the Persians. There's the wooden wall, and there, of course, is divine Salamis. Now, even though Xerxes left and he went back home, and went back to Sardis, and then eventually went home and sulked back in Persepolis for the rest of his short life. Nevertheless, the war wasn't over yet, because he left his brother-in-law Mardonius back in this area right here, Boeotia. He left his brother-in-law Mardonius in Boeotia with about 300,000 troops. So let me write that down real quick. So he left his brother-in-law. Let's see. Xerxes left Mardonius in Boeotia with, let me switch to white so you can see it here, with about 300,000 troops. Some people say 100,000. It all depends on who you believe, but the highest estimate is about 300,000 troops. So the Greeks decide to make one last stand. The Greeks have had it. They don't want any Persians staying in the Grecian peninsula. The Greeks don't want this. So finally, the Battle of Plataea, 479 BC. Know that date as well. Three main battles in the second part of the Persian Wars: Thermopylae, Salamis, and Plataea. This battle is interesting because just as Salamis was a joint naval operation between Athens and Sparta, so this is going to be the only joint army operation between Athens and Sparta. Sparta sends troops. Actually, all the Greek city-states send troops to Plataea. In the end, it's the largest Greek army ever assembled. 40,000 troops. You got to think about that. Mardonius has 300,000, but the Greeks have 40,000 troops, so that's the largest Greek army ever. 40,000 troops. However, even though that's all the city-states, basically Mardonius tried to avoid confronting them directly. He's kind of afraid of the Greeks at this point, so Mardonius basically starved them out. Mardonius cut off their supply lines. And the Greeks actually tried to retreat. The Greeks did a retreat. They called a retreat. However, they tried to retreat at night. And there was a lot of confusion. And basically, Athens and Sparta didn't get the message. By the next day, when they looked out in the morning, everybody was gone except for the Athenians and the Spartans alone. Half the army was gone. Only Sparta's men and Athens' men were left. It's kind of touching if you think about it. These two city-states can hardly ever get along. Now they're fighting alone. Only Athens and Sparta were left. Now, when this happened, the Persians attacked. That was what they were waiting for. The Persians hadn't really done they did a head-on attack. And once again, basically that was their mistake. Once they tried to attack at the Battle of Plataea, sorry, I got to do them in purple. Once they did a head-on attack, the Athenians, who we'll do in blue because we always do, and the Spartans completely destroyed their army. It's a complete victory for the Greeks again. And this time, the Persians leave the Grecian peninsula for good. They even leave Europe for good. They still have Anatolia, but they never come back to Europe. This is the last battle, the Battle of Plataea. They leave Europe for good, the last major battle of the Persian Wars. I should mention there was one more sea battle, the Sea Battle of Mycale, which is right about here. You can see it right here in Asia Minor. That also chased them away. These two battles, the Battle of Plataea and the Battle of Mycale, were both in 479 BC, and they were the last two battles of the Persian War. The end result was the Persians never attacked Greece again. The feat here should not be underestimated. Just remember, this is the Persian Empire. This huge thing was unable to beat a conglomeration of city-states much smaller than itself. Xerxes, of course, is ashamed. He spends the rest of his days in his harem drinking wine and basically not doing anything until he was murdered in 465 BC. However, there is one last bad news for the Greeks in this. Even though Xerxes could not win by military might, he does have tons of silver. He's sitting there on top of all of his wealth, and he realizes there is one way to control Greece still. The thing is this, if you want to make the Greeks not strong, if you want to weaken the Greeks, leave the Greeks alone. The lesson has been learned now. The best way to harm the Greeks is keep them fighting each other. Keep the Greeks fighting each other. That will keep Greece down. That keeps them weak. And that's basically what Xerxes does now, as well as his successors. He basically uses this gold to pay the city-states to fight each other. Whenever one city-state is down, another city-state is dominant. Xerxes' method and his successor's method is to constantly pay the city-states to fight each other. And that is going to be the lesson that we'll see a couple of units from now when we do the Peloponnesian War. Pay the city-states to fight each other. Persia lost technically, but in a certain way it has the last laugh. Persia has the last laugh.
The end. For now. Now remember, don't judge me.